The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, Heavenly Father, all authority comes from you. We thank you for placing these representatives into their positions to make and administer laws for the state of Minnesota. Bless each one of them as they do this work. Send your holy angels to protect them from all harm. In all their coming and going, may they fear no evil, for you are with them. Help each representative to remember that you have given them the privilege of being leaders for the benefit of the state and its citizens. May their decisions be equitable, fair, and just to all. Remind them that you call them to punish the evil and praise those who do good. Help them to govern so that family is protected, so industry, commerce, and business can thrive, so communities can have peace and protection. Grant each of them your wisdom so that the citizens of this great state can live quiet and peaceable lives that are godly and dignified in every way. God of grace, you are mighty and rich. Help us to remember that every good thing we have comes from your generous hand. When times are prosperous, may our hearts be thankful. In times of trouble, do not let our trust in you fail. Defeat the plans of any who would stir up strife or anarchy. Destroy the weapons of those who delight in violence. Teach each of us to examine our hearts, that we would recognize our own inclinations toward envy, malice, or hatred. And when we see those things in us, help us to flee to the refuge that you have given us in your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, who freely offers us all the full forgiveness that he has won by his death and resurrection. We ask all this in the name and for the sake of your Son, Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Pastor Samuel Williamson from Christ the King Free Lutheran Church in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of members voting remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Go ahead. Go ahead, hold on.
Members, please turn your volume down. Members,
Try again.
please be quiet so we can hear the names of members being called remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Can you hear me? Okay, here we go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Momani Hiltsley, present.
Momani Hiltsley, present.
The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present.
The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 59th Legislative Day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Thursday, April 16th, 2026.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Comparison reports. A copy of this order of business is online. If there is no objection, the motions will prevail. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail and the substitutions will be made. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business is on your desk and online. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House File number 3900.
Second reading. Second reading of Senate files.
Second reading of Senate File number 3622.
Second reading.
Second reading, Senate File number 3637.
Second reading.
And second reading, Senate File number 4339.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 5018 through 5050.
First reading House files 5018 through 5050. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 3467, an act relating to veterans. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Rehrauer moves that House concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 3467 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Rehrauer, who will explain the Senate amendments.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Members, this is the agency bill we passed with the Green Board last week that allows MDVA to direct non-monetary resources, such as programmatic expertise, to support veterans initiatives that support our veterans. The Senate version passed with a technical difference. We have a bipartisan agreement to concur with the Senate version. Please vote green.
Is there any discussion to the Senate amendments? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur with the Senate say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File Number 3467, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading as amended by the Senate. Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momonty Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momonty Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and the title is agreed to.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 3718, an act relating to animals. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Anderson, P.H., moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 3718 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the representative from Pope, Representative Anderson, P.H., who will explain the Senate amendments.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill we heard last week, it pertains to updating provisions and regulations for veterinarians in Minnesota, and also some new provisions for a new type of worker, veterinary technician. So a good addition to Minnesota's practice of veterinary medicine. The Senate changed one word. They moved one word in a sentence. Otherwise, the language is the same. So I would ask members to vote in favor of the bill and get it on the way. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion to the Senate amendments. I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would encourage a yes vote on the concurrence as well.
There being no further discussion, the motion to concur with the Senate. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File Number 3718, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading. Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momonty Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 133 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title is agreed to. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for today is House File 3782. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3782, an act relating to public safety requiring disclosure of chemical irritants used in certain buildings. The second engrossment.
There is an amendment at the desk. If there is no objection, we will let the author explain the bill before we act on the amendment. I recognize the author from Ramsey, Representative Moller, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, you are about to hear about two bills that are based on the Hortman family's experience with remediation of the Hortman home after those horrific events of June 14th. I want to first start by thanking Colin Hortman, who brought this issue to my attention, and Colin and his wife, Alina, are in the chamber today. We welcome them back. I'm going to share portions of the story that Colin shared in committee when this bill was heard, and I know many of you haven't had the opportunity to hear those stories yet if you didn't serve on those committees. On that horrible night, and I'll just tell you these, again, this is from Colin's stories about what happened. On that horrible night, law enforcement deployed tear gas throughout the home. The total amount of chemical irritants used was unknown to the family. They were told that the effects of these chemicals would only last a few days. When Colin went to the home the first week to collect some items, the powder left behind still irritated his skin and eyes, while every step on the carpet kicked more irritants into the air. It was clear that the effects of the chemicals would last much longer than a few days. The house couldn't be lived in, sold, or even accessed without exposure risks. One challenge was figuring out what chemicals had been deployed. They were unable to tell the remediation contractor what chemicals had been used. The records from the city did not clearly state what or how many irritants were used, and that made the scope of cleanup difficult. Beyond that, there was dispute about proper remediation. Homeowners insurance denied coverage for remediation, and it took time for the family to figure out that the city was responsible. And in working on this bill, I've learned that homeowners insurance often excludes this type of remediation costs for chemical irritants. However, there is a statute that states that innocent third parties are entitled to just compensation by the local government that caused the damage on the basis of law enforcement activity. So remediation specialists described the type of thorough decontamination that was needed. The remediation contractor explained that residue can remain active, irritating skin and lungs, and potentially leave behind carcinogenic compounds. In committee, we also received a letter stating that a 2023 University of Minnesota study found that 83% of people exposed to tear gas or similar chemical agents reported at least one adverse reproductive health outcome. While the insurer at first only offered basic cleanup, every contractor described the thorough cleanup that was needed. Colin said he had to become somewhat of an expert on remediation, talking to various remediators, getting quotes, researching these chemicals. The insurer wanted their own testing and analysis, leading to months of delay. The first round of testing that they did was inadequate, so the family had to hire an independent industrial hygienist. The hygienist testing revealed the damage that required extensive remediation, and it confirmed what contractors said from the beginning regarding the scope of remediation required. There were additional delays, and while ultimately the city insurance company agreed to pay the full scope of what was presented in those first few weeks, Collins said, quote, "This delay, confusion, and overall process was agonizing." Cleanup itself only took a few weeks, while approval took months. Cleanup did not even begin until 7 months after the incident. Collins said, quote, "This back and forth added more time to a process that was already emotionally difficult. And having to fight for months just to get the house cleaned the way professionals said it should be clean felt like the last thing we should have to deal with." Colin and the Hortman family have recognized that other victims may be unable to wait for 8 months for remediation, as they either need to get back into the home to live or may want to sell it. Without clear information about what chemicals were used and the proper remediation, those victims might feel pressure to accept the basic and inadequate cleaning instead of the proper remediation. Collins said, quote, "I am sharing this experience because I want future victims to have a clearer path than we did." And the first step, members, is this bill, and homeowners should be told the type and quantity of chemical agents used. So under this bill, a peace officer deploying a chemical irritant within a building must provide notice that a chemical irritant was used. The Department of Public Safety will develop a standard form that can satisfy this requirement. The form must indicate that an irritant was deployed, that specialized cleanup may be appropriate, and that the owner or occupant can contact local law enforcement to find out specifically what was deployed. Next, the owner or occupant can then contact their local law enforcement for information about the chemical irritants or similar devices used, including the quantity. The requirements in this bill will help the homeowner determine more quickly what chemicals were used, and this will aid the contractors in determining what type of remediation is necessary and help minimize the delays due to testing that the Hortman family experienced. I am unaware of any opposition to this bill, and I'm ready to present the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Moller moves to amend House File Number 3782, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Moller, who will explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a highly technical amendment. The other body decided that a "the" needed to be changed to an or an A. So that is what this amendment does, and we will be in alignment with the other body's bill. Thank you.
Is there any discussion to the amendment? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3782, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the family of Representative Hortman. We had nothing to do with this, but we apologize to you on behalf of the state. This is a situation that you should not have been subjected to. You should not have had to ask these questions, and I appreciate Chair Moller for bringing this bill so that other families don't have to suffer what you suffer through, and I recommend a yes vote.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just want to close by explaining the emotional toll that this 8-month delay took with a story that Colin recently shared with me. When Colin was able to get into the house to gather some items, he described how the kitchen was the only place that wasn't destroyed. And there was evidence in the kitchen that Mark and Melissa had made their signature drinks and had eaten some of the homemade rhubarb custard pie that was still left in the kitchen. And Colin described how, in spite of the destruction in the house, he saw love in that kitchen. He knew he had to go back into it to make those drinks, bake that pie, and, quote, sit inside that last moment of love they shared. Instead, for 8 months, he couldn't. Colin said, quote, for 8 months, I couldn't. For 8 months, I fought an insurance company while trying to grieve. When the settlement finally came and the house was finally clean, I still hadn't done what I felt I needed to do. That stings in its own way, not being able to do what needed to be done until the practical nightmare was resolved, the paperwork of death handled. Members, please vote yes so other victims don't have to experience what the Hortman family did when chemical irritants are used inside the home. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Go ahead.
Momani Hildsley, aye.
Momani Hildsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 5 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 4133. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4133, an act relating to insurance, prohibiting certain exclusions in homeowners insurance policy when damage is done by a peace officer.
There is an amendment at the desk. If there is no objection, we will let the author explain the bill before we act on the amendment. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller, the author, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this is a continuation of the bill that we just passed, and it does several things to help expedite and streamline the process for remediation. Because many homeowners insurance policies exclude coverage for remediation caused by the use of chemical irritants, this bill says that those policies cannot exclude coverage to innocent third parties who are owed just compensation under Minnesota statute for the use of chemical irritants and other devices. This does not alter the city's duty to pay for remediation. But this bill will allow the insurance company that pays for the assessment and remediation to then seek reimbursement from the city. Under this language, homeowners will no longer be required to separately seek remediation reimbursement from cities. Thus, traumatized victims will have a one-stop shop for their homeowner's claim. And with this bill, the homeowner will also have the right to choose the mitigation contractor and, if necessary, an industrial hygienicist to assess and remediate. This streamlines the process for the innocent homeowner to ensure that remediation happens in a thorough and timely manner. I'm unaware of any opposition to this bill, and I'm ready to describe the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Moller moves to amend House Law Number 4133, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A5.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Moller, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this language was added in consultation with the relevant insurers. It matches the language in the other body. It's a little more substantive than just a change from a the to an A. And there's one difference with their language that the stakeholders reached out to after it moved through committee over there that everybody agreed to. While this bill and amendment streamlines the process for remediation, again, nothing changes the responsibility of the city to pay for remediation when law enforcement deploys those chemical irritants in the homes of innocent third parties. This amendment also provides some instruction or guardrails around how the insurer can then go back to the city to get reimbursed. And I hope you will vote yes. Thank you.
Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of aye. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended.
Third reading, House Law Number 4133, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Couple things on this. Number one, this particular change in Minnesota law is unfortunate that we have to have it. First and foremost, it's helpful when a claim needs to be made that the insurance companies step up on this. And so for that, I'm sorry to the Hortman family for what they've had to go through on this. But with every tragedy comes the opportunity for joy and optimism. And with this particular bill and the provisions that Representative Moller is bringing forward, I want to take you back to that evening and that day of June 14th. If you recall, the law enforcement community was responding to the Senator Hoffman residence, and a heads-up police officer said, wait a second, the Hoffmans are not far from the Hortmans. And they broke off part of their detail and they went over to the Hortman residence. What they saw was activity in that residence, and as a result of that activity, a decision was made to use these chemical irritants. And these irritants, once they're deployed and are airborne, get into carpets, they get into walls, they get into HVAC systems, they get into all different kinds of internal operating systems in the home, and it's a hazardous situation. And I dare to think if this would have been someone other than the Hortmans who have friends in the legislature and connections to the legislature, that they would have to do something like this. We might not even had a bill hearing on this for other people in our state that would experience this. And I want to thank the insurance industry, the private insurance market, for stepping up and saying this is a problem, and to be the first point of contact with any kind of claim that would exist on here. Make whole the policyholder and make whole the homeowner who's been affected by this, and then they would seek reimbursement and compensation from, in this case, the city, or most likely from the League of Minnesota Cities Trust Fund. And so I don't take this bill lightly. There's been loss on here, and the fact that it took so long to get this cleaned up certainly delayed the healing process for the Hortman family. And I hope with today's bill and the passage by the House that we are able to close one more chapter in the Hortman experience today. Members, I strongly encourage a yes vote on this bill as amended today. Thank you, members.
Further discussion to the bill. Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I want to thank Colin for the honor of working with you to craft these bills. And more importantly, thank you for paying it forward, taking a horrible experience and seeking change for the benefit of future victims. Looking out for others is the Hortman way. And with this bill, other future innocent homeowners will experience a streamlined and thorough remediation so they can return to or sell their homes without the months of delay that the family experienced. And I just want to end with another quote from Colin. He said, quote, "Clear standards for tear gas remediation, clear expectations for insurers, and a process that does not require months of testing and negotiation would make a real difference for people who are already dealing with one of the worst moments of their lives." Members, please vote yes.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momanti Hiltsley.
Go ahead.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 3593. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3593, an act relating to transportation, designating a portion of Mark Trunk Highway 58 in Zumbrota as Officer Firefighter Gary L Schroeder, Jr. Memorial Highway.
I recognize the author from Winona, Representative Jacob, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 3593 is just a very straightforward bill that would simply designate the southernmost 1.4 miles of Highway 58 through the city of Zumbrota, essentially Main Street in the city of Zumbrota, as Officer/Firefighter Gary Schroeder, Jr. Memorial Highway. I'll note that when the applicants came forward with this proposal, I explained to them that there is a cost to it and that I would not ask the taxpayers to cover that cost. And they're aware of that and they are willing to handle that through the private sector. I'd also note that there was a letter of request from the city of Zumbrota that was signed by both Mayor Todd Hamill and City Administrator Brian Grudem for this proposal. If I could, I'd like to share a story that Gary Schroeder Sr. gave in our Transportation Committee. He said it was the day of the funeral of his son, Gary Jr., and a man approached him and said, "I'm so very sorry for killing your son." And Gary said, "Well, I know what happened to my son. You didn't kill my son. What do you mean?" The man went on to explain that his own child, 4 years old, was playing in the backyard under a playset. The playset collapsed on the child. So, of course, he called 911. Gary Jr. was first on the scene. Ultimately, the child perished from the injuries in the accident. So this just gives you an idea of the kind of trauma that people like Gary Schroeder Jr. face on a regular basis. So the bill before us today where it does honor Gary Schroeder Jr. and his family, it's also recognition to our first responders as a whole, that we see you, we appreciate that you're there for us when we dial 911, that we can count on you. If we could, I'd like to have just a moment of silence in respect of Gary Schroeder Jr.
Members, please stand for a moment of silence as we remember Officer and Firefighter Gary L Schroeder Jr. Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Also, I believe that we have the family of Gary Schroeder Jr. in the gallery with us. If you'd please stand.
Representative Jacob.
In my last words, I want to repeat the words of Gary Sr. in his testimony in the Transportation Committee. He said, "It's okay to not be okay." With that, I'd appreciate your support on this. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3593.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Scott, Representative Tabke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Jacobs, for bringing this bill to the floor today. I'm happy to, proud to support it, and deepest sympathies to the whole entire Schroeder family for your loss. And thank you very much for everyone for being here and everyone voting yes on this bill.
Any further discussion to the bill? Representative Jacob.
Thank you for your support. Please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Go.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 3676. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3676, an act relating to public safety, providing protections, remedies, and modifying various provisions of the Safe at Home program.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The bill before you, 3676, is a fix to some of the problems that have occurred around the Safe at Home program. And a lot of us get bills that come our way for different reasons, and this bill had an unusual path. My wife, or as I described her in committee, my favorite banker, had a constituent in front of her, and they were trying to make some changes that were necessary to how they do their banking, and they were clearly having a bad day. The bad day was explained to my wife, who has my permission to always give my phone number out to someone that needs help. And the person in front of my wife had experienced probably the greatest screw-up that you could have in her condition. So my constituent is somebody who came from another state, moved to Minnesota to change their name, change their Social Security, and enter our Safe at Home program. And the Department of Health and Human Services exposed her previous Social Security, her previous name, and associated it with her new assumed name and Social Security. And that is an egregious screw-up, members. But my wife called me, and I was able to get on the phone immediately with the Secretary of State's staff, who administers this program, got on the phone with constituent services. We lessened the impact of some of these things, but as I talked to my constituent over the next number of months and a year later, which is where we find ourselves today, we have this bill. What this bill will do will tighten up some of the things that were not really happening or that should have been happening. I think one of the most important parts of the bill that's going to be moving forward is that at every agency, there already exists a number of people who are associated with the Safe at Home program, but now there will be an official roster of those people so that if a question comes forward, that person will be the first person to deal with that question, which could forestall some of the exposures that we saw in the bill. Something that I added in, as you all know my background, I added into the bill the ability for an emancipated minor to take advantage of the Safe at Home program so that if they are trying to get away from their abuser, they have the ability to take full advantage of the Safe at Home program. There are some other changes in the bill. They are, I don't want to say that they're technical, but they're very much necessary, and they are shoring up the work that the Secretary of State's office is able to do, because when you enter the Safe at Home program, ostensibly you are trying to fully disappear from public view because you are the victim of domestic violence. And our role as legislators is to make sure that we're closing gaps in the law, we're closing either things that we've seen or things that we could foresee from happening. And that's what 3676 does. Members, my constituent is watching the proceedings here today from afar, and I will tell you that they are eternally grateful to the changes that are being made. No one should go through what she went through from the beginning, but our state programs should protect them once they enter a program like Safe at Home. So, Madam Speaker, that is the bill, and I will look forward to questions if necessary.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will have the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3676.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Nash, for bringing this bill and working on this. Listening to your explanation, it really occurs to me that this is the kind of work we all really enjoy doing when we learn about a problem and then we can help solve the problem. It's really a very satisfying kind of feeling. And I also think it's the Safe at Home program, of course, is a really good example of how government can help people in certain really difficult situations. I'm also, so I fully support the bill, appreciate you bringing it. I also want to give a shout out to Secretary of State Simon and his staff, because I know that they did a lot of work on the bill to get this into the shape that it's in, and my understanding is they worked with stakeholders and were really helpful. So a great partnership. I think we have a great Secretary of State in Secretary Steve Simon, and this is just one example of how he and his staff are continuing to do great work for the people of Minnesota. I urge a green vote. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank you, Co-Chair Nash. This is really an important piece of work, and I appreciate all that you've done to make this happen. Safe at Home is a vital program because it provides something many Minnesotans take for granted: the ability to live safely without fear of being found. This program, administered by the Secretary of State, gives survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and other threats a confidential address so they can rebuild their lives without exposing their location. And the need is real and growing. Safe at Home reached a major milestone this past year, serving on average over 5,000 active participants. Over half of these participants are children who rely on this program every day to stay safe. These are not abstract numbers. These are families, parents, and children who, through the use of Safe at Home's protections, are able to go to work, attend school, and participate in their communities without putting themselves at risk. Safe at Home is not just about privacy, it's about stability. It allows participants to receive mail, obtain information, vote, and interact with the public and private systems while keeping their physical address secure. House File 3676 makes real practical changes to improve the programs. Sections 7 and 8 ease the logistical barrier of being a participant by allowing participants to use their Safe at Home cards as proof of residence when applying for a state ID, a driver's license, or real ID. This is a real common sense addition. It's a document that deputy registrars already know and trust. Another provision I want to highlight, and this is the one in Section 6 that Representative Nash just talked about, was the agency contact. For many of us, we might not think about or didn't think about much until the horrific events of this past summer occurred, all the ways in which our own addresses are tied to our names and the challenges that might be present if we were trying to stay safe at home. In committee, we heard some of the examples of the vast array of topics that help participants navigate through. Whether you need to have well disclosure, radon testing, driveway permits, or even an electronic visit verification, or have aquatic weeds removed, you have to say where you live. This bill helps participants, but it also will save the agency staff time by getting their questions to the subject matter expert faster. Ultimately, Safe at Home reflects Minnesota's commitment to protecting its most vulnerable residents. It's practical, it's a proven program that saves lives, supports families, and helps people move forward. I'd like to thank the Secretary of State and their office, and I would also like to thank you, Representative Nash, for bringing this important bill forward. And I would encourage our side to vote green, please.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for the kind comments. You know, it struck me as I was thinking about how would I conclude this. I will say this. To the constituent that went to the effort that they went to run and hide, to come to the state of Minnesota and have that go sideways on them, and yet they are resolute in helping fix this law, really says a lot about them. And they are paving the way to help people who will need this in the future from not having to go through those same things. I will say yes, thank you to the Secretary's office. The phone call that was made was answered immediately, and the change was rapid. A lot of folks got involved and just rolled up their sleeves and said, this cannot happen, this should not happen, and we are going to bring forward a bill that will make sure that it does not happen in the future. With that, Madam Speaker, I encourage a green vote.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate file number 3832, an act relating to agriculture, modifying eligibility for the Dairy Assistance Investment Relief Initiative Program.
I recognize the member from Pine, Representative Nelson, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill modifies eligibility of the Dairy Assistance Investment and Relief Act, sometimes called DAIRI, DAIRI with an I. The state program provides a supplemental financial assistance to an incentive that Minnesota farmers who voluntarily participate in from the Federal Dairy Margin Coverage Program, or DMC. The DMC is administered by the Federal Farm Service Agency and offers financial support to dairy farmers when the margin between the milk prices and the feed cost becomes low. Dairy farmers have to pay a premium and enroll to participate in DMC. Under current law, Minnesota appropriates $4 million to the Dairy Assistance and Relief Initiative in 2023 for fiscal year 2024. In the 2024 legislature shifted that appropriation to fiscal year 2025. However, the USDA did not offer the DMC program in either fiscal year 24 or 25. In response, the 2025 Minnesota legislature canceled $1 million of the appropriation, returning it to the general fund and leaving $3 million available for the program. The existing session law for this $3 million in funding limits eligibility to dairy farmers who produce no more than 16 million pounds of milk in 2022, with payments amounts based upon the farm's 2022 production up to 5 million pounds. This has created an unintended problem. Farms that began operating after 2022 or that only produced milk for part of 2022 cannot qualify because they have no full year production history for that year. This bill corrects that issue by expanding eligibility to new dairy farmers who either did not sell milk during 2022 or sold milk for only part of that year. For those farms, payment would be based upon the production history established through their DMC enrollment rather than on the 2022 production. This bill also allows any unencumbered funds remaining after June 30th, 2026 to be used for similar purposes under the program. In short, approximately 30 new dairy farms that have come online since 2022 will be eligible for the program solely because they did not exist or were not fully operating in 2022. This bill ensures that those new operations are able to access the same financial assistance as other qualifying dairy farms. And I encourage a green vote.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate file number 3832.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson R.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm going to be voting for the bill. I know there may be some folks that may not, but I think it's important to look as we start getting the agricultural bills on the floor. We have a very broken system in agriculture. Part of the reason we have to go back and do this retroactively is that we're dependent on federal action. We had to wait for a farm bill, and that farm bill still has not happened. An additional bill came. So I want to be real clear about what we're doing in this bill. We're using state money to provide to people who own a business, which happens to be a farm, to apply for federal money. And I'm old enough to remember Freedom to Farm, where we said we didn't need price supports. We didn't want those. That was a conservative position. We have proposals in our state for very large dairy operations that will be vertically integrated. Many of us have that view of a very small farm, neighborhood farms, rural communities. And what this bill does is it retroactively goes back and provides this assistance for about 30 of those farms. We're trying to focus on smaller farms. But the large economic engine of get bigger and have vertical integration, where you have the means of production with the processing and the distribution and the retail, drives out that Minnesota family farm that we've been thinking of. So this is somewhat unique. I think it's also unique when we look in context for the discussions we've had over the last several years about how do we provide money and who do we provide money to. I can't think of another place where we provide state money to access the federal money like this directly to businesses. I can't think of anybody. But we've made that decision, and we also have made that appropriation to try to help out those small farms. I think we need to have these discussions that we haven't had for a very long time about how do we help our state out. Is getting bigger the only option left? Do we try to provide these subsidies to do what we can to keep new startup dairy farms going and make sure that they have the environment where they can thrive and the rural communities can thrive? So I'm recommending a yes, but I think there are discussions ahead about how do we actually support agriculture, and by supporting agriculture, helping out our state.
Further discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Pope, Representative Anderson, PE.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Representative Nelson, thank you for the bill. It's been a long time coming because of things at the federal level and things happening here at the state level as well. But I think we all appreciate the job done by Minnesota's dairy farmers. This bill targets relief to small and medium-sized dairymen. And as a former dairy farmer, Representative Nelson was a great person to carry this bill. He understands the 7-day-a-week, 24/7 commitment that dairymen have for their herds, and they do a great job. And I love milk. I think we all love milk. And as a support for our dairymen and women in the state of Minnesota, would appreciate support for the bill. And again, thanks, Representative Nelson.
Further discussion to the bill. I recognize the author, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Speaker. And I would just encourage a yes vote on this. This bill did pass unanimous in the Senate, and let's put up a green board today and support our small local dairy farms. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 4 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 2358, an act relating to public safety, providing enhanced criminal penalty for certain violations of coercion crime.
I recognize the author from Chippewa, Representative Van Binsbergen, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise for a special young man from my district, from Olivia, Minnesota. He was a great kid. He was just beginning his first high school years. He was a straight A student. He was on the robotics team. He played trombone in the band. He was in sports. He was a fantastic golfer. In fact, he was in the section golf meet. And his friends always said, if there was an issue or if there was trouble, we could always count on Carter to be there for us. Carter died by suicide after he was sextorted online. He was only 16 years old. He was the all-American kid, as you can see by the pamphlets that are coming around to you now. Carter received a message on Instagram from a girl, so he believed. And they struck up a long conversation. And during the process of that long conversation, she convinced him to send photos of himself. Now, after much coaxing and encouragement, Carter reluctantly sent the photos. And once the photos were received, the person Carter, we thought was a girl who he was talking to, it was clear it wasn't. And then the demands started, and they ramped up, one demand after another. Let me tell you, Carter felt trapped. All this happened within a 24-hour window. 24 hours. These scammers find victims by scouring through social media sites across the internet. And they often look for teenage boys and girls. They look for kids that are involved in activities in sports like Carter was, or active in school. And they prey upon these kids because they know that these kids are concerned with what other kids are going to think, just like Carter. The National Center of Missing and Exploited Children say that they receive almost 100 complaints daily from financial extortion. And we know that many, many, many kids have committed suicide over this issue. You know, as I told you, Carter was a fantastic kid, and he came from a home where they had actually had discussions about this subject. His mom is a family mental health therapist, so they had talked about it. That's how quick this can happen, and it can happen to anybody's kid. This afternoon, in the gallery, we have Carter's parents, Dan and Jamie Brenseth. I want to thank the Brenseths for being here today, for being willing to share Carter's story. You know, I've got 3 kids, and I cannot imagine losing one of my children. I can't imagine the pain that this has caused you and your family. But you know, their mission, they have made it their mission to stand up and create awareness around this issue. They want to make sure what happened to their son Carter doesn't happen to other moms and dads' kids. And so I just really commend you and thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Representative Van Binsbergen.
Today, members, we have an opportunity to make sure that predators that prey on our children are held accountable. House File 2358 gives law enforcement and the judiciary system in Minnesota the ability to deal with the thugs and make sure that they're held accountable and make sure that they receive significant time in prison. Almost every state in the nation has laws about sextortion. Over the last few years, states have been ramping up the penalty phase of this crime. And I just encourage you to join me today and to join Dan and Jamie as we stand and we fight for our kids, that we don't allow this to happen any longer. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 2358.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you, members. I just want to say first an incredible thank you, Representative Van Binsbergen. You know, I think we just discussed about this young man, Carter, but I also want to tell you that this bill has been becoming more popular these days, and for all the wrong reasons. It has become very popular, including a colleague of mine that I work closely with at the National Council of State Legislators. And I think the reason for that is that our South Carolina representative, Brandon Guffey, his 17-year-old son, Gavin Guffey, died by suicide in 2022, after being the victim. A quiet, good kid, the kind that all of us appreciate and understand, the kind who was active in sports, and the kind with a bright future ahead. Until the shame was just too much for him. And within hours, he was dead. And I want to bring the point home that there is a group, the Social Media Victims Law Center, who represents cases from around the country that address social media harms, including cases like this one. And every single morning, they have a briefing. They sit down at a table and they talk about all the new cases that have come in overnight of situations exactly like this one, with parents grieving for their children. This is a good bill. And as someone who works quite a bit in online child safety and in this space in technology, I love technology. I'm a big fan. But the bottom line here is that there are places where we need to do more to protect our children. So I want to say a very heartfelt thank you to Representative Van Binsbergen for this specific bill, and I would urge members on both sides of the aisle to vote green.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I, too, want to encourage members to vote green, and just wanted to say thank you to Representative Van Binsbergen for bringing this bill. I'm glad we could work out the language in the interim. It's in really good shape. And really importantly, thank you to Jamie's parents or Carter's parents, excuse me, for telling your story and for being here time and time again and trying to prevent this from happening to any other families. So thank you very much. Please vote yes.
Any further discussion to the bill? Representative Van Binsbergen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you both for speaking up and being heard. Also, I want to thank Senator Lang. I know Senator Lang was very involved in help put this together as well, so I just really want to give him a shout out. Again, thank you both, Dan and Jamie, for being here, and just glad I could be part of helping make this come and happen. Members, I encourage you all to vote green, and let's pass Carter's Law.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3827, an act relating to public safety, clarifying certain grants from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to local law enforcement as reimbursements.
I recognize the member from Beltrami, Representative Duran, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a BCA policy bill that's real clear, no flubber to it. It helps with the crime data collection modernization, BCA grant and reimbursement clarification that helps streamline some support to our local law enforcement. Also expands the order for protection clarification with vulnerable adults, and helps with automated expungement. If there's any errors there, it helps with the BCA clarify that up. So that is the bill, Madam Speaker, and thank you.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Duran moves to amend House File Number 3827. The amendment is coded A1.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Duran, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This one is real clear. Again, it takes one word and changes it. It deletes its and changes it to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, this amendment's slightly more extensive than my amendment in our previous bill to change a "the" to an "a," but it is highly technical, and please support the amendment.
Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There being no further amendments to the bill, the clerk will give the bill as amended its third reading.
Third reading, House Law Number 3827, as amended.
Third reading, discussion to the bill. Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Duran, for working with the governor's team and the BCA specifically on this bill. It's a good bill, and I hope members will support it.
Further discussion? Representative Duran.
Vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Go ahead.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is passed as amended and its title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3453, an act relating to public safety, controlled substances.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson J., to explain your bill.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, members. House File 3453 was heard in the Public Safety Committee. Whether you've heard it called kratom or kratom, both are considered technically correct, but this bill will increase the age to purchase it from 18 to 21. This really is just a straightforward, common sense approach to the first steps towards regulating kratom here in Minnesota. This product is widely available in communities throughout the state, from gas stations to tobacco stores and more. In 2018, the Minnesota legislature passed its first law regulating kratom here in Minnesota, requiring a person to be 18 to purchase it. Over the last few legislative sessions, however, 15 other states have passed laws setting 21 as the minimum age for purchase and possession. Minnesota consistently sets 21 as the age for purchasing and possessing regulated substances like alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis. House File 3453 raises kratom to that same requirement. Statewide, we've seen an increase in calls to poison control and questions at cities around the state. And I've been gathering a coalition of other stakeholders to really continue these conversations about the additional responsible regulations that we would like to see in the upcoming sessions. There we will address licenses, labeling, liabilities, location, and the look of both the packaging and advertisements. But for now, this bill will simply raise the age to align with the age that we have set for tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis. And I ask for a green vote. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 3453.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You'll see handed out to you just briefly a minute ago, the Legislator's Guide to the Natural Leaf of Kratom versus 7-hydroxymitragynine. Now, yeah, it is pretty difficult. What I wanted to draw members' attention to is there is a distinct difference between what you hear about kratom and the 7-OH like extract that is also converted of that particular plant. There is a need for increased regulation, I would say, because this is something that millions of Americans consume. The vast, vast majority don't have any adverse effects. But when there is something entirely unregulated, you do not necessarily know as a consumer what you are purchasing at the store. So increasing this age limit to 21, I think, is a reasonable step, and I would support members voting for the bill. But what we have seen before, like in 2017, there was a push to schedule this. And when that was attempted, there was a massive outpouring of opposition because there is a distinct difference between 7-OH and kratom, the natural leaf. I think there is work that can be done to make sure that consumers know what they're buying. We could even set percentages for what is in the actual product, but a move to a complete prohibition that we saw back in 2017, I hope we don't see again, because we know that prohibition doesn't work and many people are able to use kratom safely, and that's many, many of your constituents here today. So members, I would urge support of the bill. Going forward on this particular policy area, I would encourage a slow walk to make sure things are done properly. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Candy, Ohio, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I also, is that on? Is that working? Okay. Thank you, Representative Hanson, for bringing this bill forward, and I appreciated visiting with you about this issue this summer over the fall to make sure that we were kind of addressing what we could do this year in this historic tie in the Minnesota House. Let's make sure we get something through on this kratom issue that we're seeing a lot of it in convenience stores and tobacco shops, and we don't have the right rules really set up right now for this. Representative West, you're exactly right. The 7-OH products of kratom is something much different than what some people might be trying to defend or to say that they're taking that well and using it properly. Because some, it can help you sort of actually work off of substance use disorder. For some, it's a product that's used that can help. But there are some, and most, that we're concerned about is the 7-OH level of chemically changed product that we need to make sure we keep an eye on. So moving the age limits this year from 18 to 21 is something that we can bring some more awareness to it. Look for this. If you go into the convenience stores, if you see something on their display, ask the clerk, hey, what is this about? Do you know anything about this? 99 out of 100% they'll say, no, but it sells fast. I don't know anything about it. What you can do is just let them know that we're just bringing awareness to this. You now have to be 21 years or older if this bill passes and gets signed on. This is an important thing we need to do. Kratom at this level, the 7-OH, affects the body just like opioids do. Less of an impact. No one has died in Minnesota because of this yet, but nationally they have. Let's get ahead of this, folks, so we don't lose one more person to something that they didn't know what they were taking. So, Representative Hanson, thank you so much for bringing the bill. I support this, and I hope others do too. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Hanson, thank you very much for bringing this bill. I appreciate the digging into it. I didn't know much about it, but I have heard a couple of really heartbreaking stories of constituents that have loved ones that have become addicted to this. So I'm glad we're taking a step, and I'm glad we're also thinking about what comes next to make sure that Minnesotans can stay safe. Thank you.
Further discussion to the bill? Any further discussion to the bill? Representative Lee.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the other members who have spoken about this already. I think as an Asian American member and a Southeast Asian member of the legislature, I just wanted to also share some context to the substance. I know some people have talked a little bit about this, but this is a natural herbal remedy that Southeast Asians have used in Indonesia and other places of the Southeast Asian continent for a very long time. I think someone discovered this substance and thought it was marketable, and so it's now exploded, and that's why we have this issue before us. So I want to thank Representative Hanson for leading this bill, because it is an issue that is affecting our young people whose mental health needs are not being met in other places. But do want to point out that in the United States now, the way it's being marketed, kratom is poorly regulated, and there are synthetic variations that include a compound that really should be restricted. And so, if you're kind of wondering, like, why is there this scientific difference, or like why people are talking about this, that is the reason. And so I think that as we move forward, I hope that we'll work together on a culturally sensitive and a culturally competent way to regulate this substance that is an issue for our young people because of the way it's being made here. So thank you.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, everybody, for the good discussion today. I'll ask you for a green vote. I am appreciative of everyone who told the stories about this. You took the words right out of my mouth, so I didn't have to say as much. So thanks for sharing in the workload with me. It is really important that we remember that the responsible regulation will follow. I happen to know a thing or two about regulating unregulated products, and so I'm looking forward to bringing that to this work as well. And I hope that folks know that nothing about this is claiming kratom is inherently bad or otherwise, but it is important that we're aware of it. Most of the people I've talked to in this body and beyond had no idea what this was. So whether it's 7-OH or really kratom, the marketing behind it is in fact killing people. In Burnsville, a woman has overdosed and we lost her to this. So it is important to know that this is a dangerous thing, and that's why we want to make sure that we're keeping it out of the hands of young people and raising it to 21. So ask you for a green vote. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Go ahead.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 5 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 3496. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 3496, an act relating to corrections, modifying the supervision abatement status policy.
I recognize the member from Sibley, Representative Harder, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Speaker Damath and members, for the opportunity to speak to House File 3496. The Minnesota Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act, also known as the MRRA, was enacted in 2023. It created a framework directing the Department of Corrections to incentivize participation in rehabilitative programming, reduce incarceration through earned release mechanisms, and reinvest savings into public safety and community-based supports. Importantly, the law requires the Department of Corrections to engage with the victims and stakeholders and to report annually to the legislature. In the 2026 report, we clearly heard from victims. One of their key concerns was how outstanding restitution is handled when determining supervision abatement status, and the need to consider whether an individual has the ability to pay, but lacks the willingness to pay. That concern is exactly what House File 3496 addresses. Supervision abatement is an inactive form of supervision. Individuals no longer need to regularly report to an agent, but they remain under conditions of release. And we also know from the fiscal year 2025 report that only 48% of individuals on felony supervision fully paid restitution by the time their sentence ended. That means more than half of victims are not being made whole. The original version of this bill would have required full restitution payment before qualifying for supervision abatement. That approach raised concerns in committee. The bill before you today reflects those conversations. It is a thoughtful, balanced approach. This language was developed in collaboration with victims' coalitions and the Department of Corrections to reflect best practices to ensure fairness. Under House File 3496, individuals who had the means to pay restitution but willfully choose not to will not receive the benefit of supervision abatement. So this is about accountability. When restitution is taken seriously, victims are better supported, individuals are held accountable, and public trust in our justice system is strengthened. This bill is the result of meaningful collaboration incorporating feedback from committee members, victim advocates, and correction professionals. It reflects a shared commitment to doing what is right. I want to thank the members of the Public Safety Committee for your work to support victims and strengthen accountability. Members, thank you for your time, and I respectfully ask for a green vote on House File 3496.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 3496.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Harder, for bringing this bill. It is a good bill, and I just wanted to thank you for working, especially with the DOC, on the language, to get the bill in this shape. Having worked with victims and victim advocates for years, this has been something, boy, I remember hearing about victims really wanting restitution 10, 15 years ago, especially in cases where they knew the offender had an ability to pay. And so that's what this is about, is making sure that victims can get that reimbursement if the victim or if the offender has the ability to pay, because certainly if they don't have the ability to pay, that's a different situation. And just sort of broader issues related to restitution, I hope that we can work on increasing the wages that people can make while they're incarcerated. Right now, they earn between 25 cents and $1.75 per hour, and restitution is taken out of that at a certain point, but restitution could be paid more fully in addition to the fairness of the labor that these people are providing. And I'll just say too, restitution, as I mentioned, is a very big deal for victims, and unfortunately, there's billions of dollars in restitution that's been wiped out with the pardons of this federal administration. So lots of things to be thinking about when we're talking about restitution, but this is a very good bill, and I I encourage members to vote yes. Thank you.
Further discussion to the bill. Representative Harder.
Thank you, Speaker and members. House File 3496 strikes the right balance. It protects victims, reinforces accountability, and ensures that those who have the means to pay restitution do so. When an individual can make things right and chooses not to, consequences must be real, not an option. This puts victims first, preserves fairness in our system, and strengthens public trust in our justice system. I ask for your green vote.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, aye.
Momani Hildsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 3762. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 3762, an act relating to public safety, authorizing chiefs of police and sheriffs to open certain expunged records.
I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Witte, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill is about striking a reasonable balance between second chances and public safety. Minnesota has expanded automatic expungement in recent years, which can help people move forward, but it also has created situations where law enforcement no longer has the full picture when making firearms permit decisions. This bill fixes that by allowing police chiefs and sheriffs to consider relevant expungement convictions as part of their review while still leaving the final decision to their discretion. A past offense does not automatically mean denial, and applicants still get an explanation and a right to appeal. It simply gives law enforcement the ability to use their judgment based on real risk. Think about a situation where someone had a felony assault conviction that was later expunged. On paper, that record may no longer show up, but local law enforcement may still know the history and the circumstances behind it. Under the current law, their hands can be tied when that person applies for a permit to carry. This bill allows them to take that history into account, weigh whether there is a risk to others, and make a decision accordingly. This is just common sense and an important step to keep our community safe. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 3762.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Witte, for bringing this bill. It is a good bill, and I think this loophole that was created when the expungement law was passed was not intended. We didn't intend to create this loophole, so I'm glad we can close this and get this fixed. I hope members vote yes.
I recognize a member from Scott, Representative Steer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So as being one of the people that have to sign these permits, we want all the information we can possibly get. And this bill does that, exactly that. It opens up some doors that we can look into the past and see, was this person convicted? And it also helps to keep guns out of people's hands that shouldn't have them. Thank you. It's a good bill.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author yield?
Representative Witte will yield. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Witte, under Minnesota Statute 624.714, the scenario that I will share with you is if someone was convicted of a crime and became a prohibited person, even though their conviction has been expunged, does their status as a prohibited person get expunged also?
Representative Witte.
No, it does not.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I think that's the important distinction, is that they are still a prohibited person, and by giving this information to people like Chief Steer, we have the opportunity to make sure that people who don't or shouldn't have guns are not allowed to have guns because they chose to commit a crime that made them a prohibited person. So I think it's a very good bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Witte.
Thank you. I appreciate the support. This is a way of protecting our communities we serve. Complete background information helps prevent prohibitive individuals from lawfully obtaining permits, strengthen the safety of our neighborhoods and the officers who respond to the calls. Maintaining public confidence in the permit process, victims, families, and the public expect that when a permit is issued, a thorough and accurate review occurred. This bill reinforces that trust while preventing lawful gun ownership. Thank you for your support.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names or the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, aye.
Momani Hildsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 128 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is passed and the title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3826, an act relating to public safety, modifying and adding definitions of purpose of identity theft crime.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Witte, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House File 3826 is a BCA policy bill related to the work of the BCA Financial Crimes and Fraud Section. The bill would provide additional tools to the BCA in its fight against all types of fraud in Minnesota. The bill expands identity theft to include AI or technology-based duplication of someone's likeness and extends the statute of limitations for some types of fraud-related crimes. The extension is important due to the complex nature of these crimes and helps ensure fraudsters are held accountable. And I also want to thank Representative Pinto for his work as we move this bill through so we can strengthen it. I appreciate your support today. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3826.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this, too, is a good bill. Thank you to Representative Witte for, again, partnering with the governor's team on this financial crimes and fraud package. I also just want to highlight the provision in the bill that's related to AI technology, how that's being used for people to commit identity theft. They can use their voices now and, for example, in call someone and say that pretend that they're grandma and they want money. It's really horrible. This technology is advancing quickly, and so I'm glad we can address that portion of it here, and I encourage members to vote yes.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Witte.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you all for providing the tools for our law enforcement so they can get after these crimes. I appreciate your support.
The clerk will take the roll.
I'll trade you.
The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Go ahead.
Momani Hildsley, aye.
Momani Hildsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3768, an act relating to corrections, clarifying responsibilities of the Department of Corrections, licensed juvenile and adult community-based facilities.
There is an amendment at the desk. If there is no objection, we will let the author explain the bill first, and then we will take up the amendments. I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Curran.
Yes, thank you so much, Speaker. Briefly, House File 3768 is a budget-neutral Department of Corrections policy bill that modernizes Minnesota's licensing structure for juvenile detention facilities and halfway houses, and we could get into the amendment next.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Curran moves to amend House File Number 3768, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize Representative Curran, the author of the amendment, who will explain the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment is simply a technical fix. The first thing it does is fixes a drafting error, and it also tightens up the definition of correctional facility so that it doesn't unintentionally include community-based residential programs. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended.
Third reading, House File Number 3768, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are good common sense fixes, and the agency has worked with Representative Curran, and I encourage a green vote.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Curran.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and thank you, Chair Novotny. Right now, these facilities are operating under a framework that's more than 50 years old. It's an all-or-nothing system where a facility is either fully licensed or not at all. When a facility falls short of standards, the DOC essentially has one option, and that's to revoke the license entirely. Of course, that approach is highly disruptive for youth and residents in those facilities. This bill fixes the outdated structure by extending the same graduated licensing tools available for local jail facilities to juvenile facilities and halfway houses, and I ask for member support. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hilsley.
Momani Hilsley, aye.
Momani Hilsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 6 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title is agreed to. There is a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3769, an act relating to corrections, clarifying in law the multiple levels of substance abuse care.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Curran, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House File 3769 is another Department of Corrections bill, this time a technical bill that includes budget-neutral changes to various sections of statute that govern operations under the DOC, and we could move to the amendment.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Curran moves to amend House File Number 3769. The first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize Representative Curran, the author of the amendment, to explain the amendment.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. The A2 amendment removes sections 1 through 3 of the bill that pertains to tuberculosis screening. This is agreed upon by the DOC and stakeholders, and I ask for member support.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3769, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize a member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Curran, for bringing this forward. One of the things I'd like to point out for some of our members are, if you are in favor of saving money, and I know some of you are, if you're in favor of saving money, you should be voting for this bill. One of the things that is a big deal about this, I think, is opening up the mental health care. Now, right now, if you want to save money, we will make sure that these incarcerated persons get the help that they need so they can be treated in-house, as opposed to having to send them to a treatment facility that is outrageously expensive. Now, right now, the treatment and the mental health beds that they have are at Oak Park, and they're very limited. There's no mental health beds at the Shakopee Women's Prison, and if they need to be treated medically, it gets, as I said, extremely expensive. So if you are a fiscal hawk, this bill should be for you. If it's not, if you vote against this bill, you are voting to spend a lot of money to send patients out of the system to get treated at other facilities. I recommend a yes vote.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Curran.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker, and thank you so much, Chair Novotny. I appreciate your insight on that, and that's absolutely true. These changes expand access to mental health unit beds. It adds flexibility to ensure individuals experiencing acute mental health needs get the timely and appropriate care that they need, and it acknowledges the multiple levels of substance use disorder treatment provided through the DOC's residential, intensive outpatient, and outpatient programming for both adults and youth. While these updates are technical, they do play an important role in supporting the Department of Corrections' ability to deliver services effectively and respond to the needs of those in their custody and care. I ask for member support. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hilsley.
Momani Hilsley, aye.
Momani Hilsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 5 nays, the bill is passed as amended, and its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 3825. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3825, an act relating to public safety, requiring judge to inquire whether victim has been notified of plea and sentence hearings.
I recognize the member from Winona, Representative Rapinski, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 3825 is a DPS, Office of Justice Programs policy bill aimed at reducing crime and supporting victims. It strengthens Minnesota victims' rights by ensuring notifications for plea and sentencing hearings, protecting identities in specific prosecutor documents, and providing notice if an offense is eligible for early expungement or automatic expungement. Members, I ask for your support on this bill.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3825.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Rapinski, for bringing this bill and for working in collaboration with the governor's team, especially the Office of Justice Programs. This bill provides important victim notification, and I hope that members will vote yes.
Further discussion to the bill. Representative Rapinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hilsley.
Momani Hilsley, aye.
Momani Hilsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 4425, an act relating to fraud, increasing the statute of limitations for crimes involving medical assistance fraud or theft of money.
There are no amendments at the desk. I recognize Representative Myers from Hennepin to explain the bill.
Thank you, Speaker. Members, House File 4425 is a bill focused on strengthening Minnesota's ability to prosecute fraud. Specifically, this legislation extends the statute of limitations from 6 years to 10 years for crimes involving medical assistance fraud and other theft of taxpayer dollars. Right now, we heard in committee about how complex these can be, how it can take years to uncover, multiple organizations, layered transactions, and coordinated across agencies and jurisdictions. By the time some of these investigators identify what's happening, the legal window is closing. What this bill does, it helps address those challenges. It increases the statute of limitations to give prosecutors and investigators more time, and I would ask for members' support.
The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 4425.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Myers yield to a question?
Representative Myers will yield to a question. Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I am planning on supporting this bill today, but I do have a question about how you came up with the number 10 as opposed to a different time frame.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Representative, for that question. I was just trying to keep some consistency with some of the other statute of limitations I've seen, both from a state level and a federal level.
Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I am a little confused because the Representative Witte bill that we just passed, that was House File 3826, also changed some of the statutes within the same chapter of law and made the statute of limitations 7. And actually, one of the provisions in the bill he passed is the same as one of the provisions in your past that's bill that is now 10 years. So I just really hope that when these bills continue to move, I think that your bill, I'm unaware that it's had a hearing in the Senate yet or in the other body. So I'm really hoping as we continue to discuss this, we can come together and figure out what the appropriate number is and if there's any inconsistencies in the bills we're passing. But with that, I'll recommend a yes vote. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Myers, for bringing this bill. I have a similar bill. My original bill was extending the statute of limitations to 15 years, but I agreed with the recommendation to go with 10 years, and the reason is it mirrors the statute of limitations in the banking statutes for financial crimes, and it was recommended by both the former first U.S. attorney and the current U.S. attorney as a reasonable compromise. So I think these crimes take a lot of time to investigate, and I think giving us the additional years is very important, so I urge a green vote. Thank you.
Further discussion to the bill? Representative Myers.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, this bill isn't just about protecting taxpayer dollars. It's about protecting the integrity of the programs that we have that serve Minnesotans. And, you know, as was touched on here, giving that extra couple years is something I think we have all seen that we need. It ensures that those individuals that committed the fraud don't just wait for that clock to run out. It gives law enforcement the time necessary to pursue those complex fraud cases. And I think it's a practical step that, again, strengthens the oversight, brings a little more public trust back to, you know, Minnesota government, and I would ask for your support.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 133 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. There's a bill at the desk. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3621, an act relating to state government withholding payments to program participants under certain circumstances.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn, who will explain the bill.
Thank you very much. This is the Payment Withholding Authority under Credible Allegation of Fraud bill. This bill strengthens and makes permanent the temporary authority that was given in 2025 to make it permanent authority. In this particular version of the bill, the agencies across the enterprise would have the authority to withhold payments. Current authority will expire in 2027 and requires a threshold of the preponderance of evidence to withhold payments. This bill lessens the standard to credible allegation to align with existing authority that is granted to DHS and DCYF. The current law effectively requires that the agency understand the preliminary investigation before the agency can withhold payment. In this proposal, it allows the agencies to pause payments immediately upon receiving a credible allegation, while the agency also follows up on the credible allegation. The program participants may request administrative reconsideration, which is also consistent with the process in DHS and DCYF, if the subject's payment is withheld. The proposal also extends the agency's ability to withhold payment beyond 60 days, which is the limit in the temporary language. There are additional processes to ensure due process, and I would like for the body to know that DHS has used their process over 500 times in the last year, and DCYF has used their authority over 40 times. The term credible allegation of fraud is defined in the bill so that it is ultimately defined in the bill and ultimately is verified by the agency head. Let's see. The language also makes it clear that the agency head is responsible for verifying the existence of a credible allegation to be investigated. And members, I'm asking for a green vote, and I can say more on third reading.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
NISCA moves to amend House File Number 3621, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A3.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska, who will explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 3621 is a good bill as it stands. It takes positive steps to prevent fraud by creating additional accountability. Accountability is necessary. Minnesotans demand it. But accountability has to come not just to nonprofits who are engaged in fraud, but also the government officials and agencies who have allowed it to happen. And we have seen in this administration, especially, the need to hold this administration accountable and government employees and departments accountable. The A3 amendment closes that gap, and we know the A3 amendment is necessary because the administration has essentially admitted that it's necessary in the O'Malley report on February 23rd. The administration has admitted that this administration presided over a compassion over compliance culture for years. They said 70% compassion, 30% compliance. Well, we need to make compliance 100% of the job, and the A3 amendment, the Fraud Isn't Free bill, would do that. We have seen from this administration the faces of failure when we don't hold government accountable. This administration has allowed a compliance lead who literally committed felonies on videotape, on the clock, to keep his job. Someone who was responsible for holding people accountable to the law, breaking the law, keeping his job. We've seen DHS employees who backdated documents to hide their own negligence from auditors. We've seen an assistant commissioner who oversaw a $100 million fraud-prone program. The one person who's been fired. When were they fired? Just happened to be the day before Chair Robbins called them in front of the fraud committee to testify. Members, Minnesotans demand accountability from our government. It's good. We should pass accountability measures for the nonprofits that have overseen this fraud, but we must pass accountability measures for the administration to hold them accountable. This administration has shown they will not hold anyone accountable. We have to do it. And this amendment imposes necessary accountability. It does so by ending the bureaucratic shuffle with a 5-year ban on state employment for negligent staff. It implements a 25% salary cut for agency heads who can't, if you can't protect the vault, you don't get the manager's bonus. It's time to finally hold somebody accountable. If you oversee fraud and allow it to happen, it should happen through pay cuts, and it should happen through holding the agency budgets accountable. Until the state recovers 25% of the stolen money, they are going to have to show what their plan is. We don't just reward failure. We shouldn't. Unfortunately, that's what this administration has done. The A3 amendment is needed to do that. So it builds on the accountability that is in House File 3621 by ensuring that government is held accountable, not just nonprofits. Please vote yes.
Discussion to the amendment.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
Under Rule 3.21, amendments must be germane, and I'd prepare to offer advice.
State your advice.
The underlying bill deals only with Chapter 15. The amendment proposed here, Section 4, would expand to include Chapter 16. It would also dramatically expand the scope of the underlying bill by bringing in every single budget for every single agency in the state, and that is a substantial expansion beyond the narrow focus of Representative Cleavorn's underlying bill. And I'd ask that you find the point of order well taken.
Advice, Madam Speaker?
State your advice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Clearly, this amendment is germane to the bill, which is amendment governing state agencies, amending Chapter 15, governing state agencies in general. That's Chapter 15. I understand that it does also impact other portions governing state agencies in general, which are in other chapters, but it's primarily focused on Chapter 15, governing state agencies in general. In addition, it does enhance the purpose of the bill, the scope and purpose of the bill, which is to impose accountability for fraud. It enhances that by creating accountability that also applies to state agencies. It doesn't require a major change in the bill. It's, again, a better addition to the bill to impose accountability. It's not an independent question. Again, we're talking about how to stop fraud, how to hold bad actors who are allowing fraud to happen accountable, whether they are in nonprofits or those who are the commissioners or the agents or the employees who are overseeing the bill. Again, the subject of the bill is fraud in state government. How are we going to hold bad actors accountable? It's unfortunate that Democrats have missed a couple of the bad actors that need to be held accountable, but this amendment is certainly germane to the bill. I urge you to find the point of order not well taken.
I have studied the amendment, I've reviewed the bill, I've considered your advice, and I'm ruling that the point of order is not well taken.
Madam Speaker, I appeal the ruling of the Speaker and request a roll call.
Representative Long requests a roll call. There will be a roll call. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I urge you to vote yes to uphold the ruling of the Speaker and to allow the folks on the other side of the aisle to vote twice on this amendment.
Further discussion. Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would urge members to vote against the ruling of the Speaker. Representative Niska made very clear that the underlying bill was not aligned with his amendment and that his amendment expands the scope dramatically to take into account every single agency, and we did not include that in the underlying bill, which is why this is not germane.
Further discussion to the appeal. Members, the question before the body is, shall the decision of the Speaker stand as a judgment of the House? A yes or a green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker. A red or a no vote goes against the ruling of the Speaker. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, no.
Momani Hiltsley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 67 nays, the appeal does not stand. Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Cleavorn.
Okay, so I'm confused right now. So the ruling of the Speaker does not stand. Is that correct? So do you want me to speak to the amendment? I'm confused.
For clarification, members, the ruling of the Speaker stands. The amendment is before the body.
I don't believe that is accurate. Is that correct? If the ruling of the Speaker did not stand, then is the amendment germane?
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And perhaps you can clear this up if I'm wrong, but there was a motion made by Representative Long wishing to rule this out of order. It was found to not be germane. The appeal was then made. The appeal failed, so therefore the amendment is before the body because it did not, the motion to overturn the ruling of the Speaker did not prevail. If you could confirm that for me, that would be great.
Members, the amendment, the Niska amendment is before the body. There was an appealing of the rule of the Speaker. The vote was 67-67. That means that the ruling of the Speaker still stands. The amendment is before the body.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
Madam Speaker, under Rule 13.3 of the Supplemental Agreement for House Organization, if a question of germaneness is raised under 3.21 and the question is put to the body, the affirmative vote of at least one member of each caucus is required to find the motion or proposition germane. It was tied 67-67. There was not an affirmative vote of a member of our caucus. And I ask you to find the point of order well taken.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, is there a point of order before the body? I didn't hear a point of order.
There's a point of order before the body.
I offer advice, Madam Speaker.
State your advice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Under the precedent established by this body last year, the a 67-67 vote does not overturn the ruling of the Speaker. So I urge you to find this additional point of order not well taken.
Madam Speaker, advice.
State your advice.
Madam Speaker, the agreement that you signed, Madam Speaker, Speaker Emeritus signed, Leader Niska signed, Leader Long signed, states, quote, if a decision of presiding officer under House Rule 3.21 is appealed, the affirmative vote of at least one member of each caucus is required to find the motion or proposition germane. Madam Speaker, that's exactly the situation that we're in right now. If that was defied by, in a past session, that was wrong then, and let's not compound it now. The words could not be more clear. That was agreed to by the 4 leaders at that time. Our word has to mean something in this body. This was signed by the leaders. The language is extremely clear. Madam Speaker, I'd please ask you to find the point of order well taken and to follow Rule 13.3, to which the leaders agreed. Thank you.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members. Madam Speaker, advice, just to add
State your advice.
to my previous statement, the precedent in question was April 25th, 2025, House Journal, page 2641, Madam Speaker.
Advice, Madam Speaker.
State your advice.
Thank you, Speaker. And I want to thank Representative Niska for pulling up the date that we all remember sitting in this room where that rule was defied in front of us and in front of all Minnesotans and disregarded. That is about, I think, what's about to happen now, unless the Speaker would like to change her mind and follow what has been signed. Thank you.
Further advice? Representative McDonald, state your advice.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary procedure or point of order?
There's a point of order before us. State your advice.
Good. My advice is that we should uphold the ruling of the Speaker and get on the business of the amendment so we can vote on it and speak on it and finally get to the gist of the fraud which is happening in our agencies. That's why we need to uphold the ruling of the Speaker and address Representative Niska's amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I have heard your advice. I have considered your advice, and I find the point of order not well taken. The amendment, the Niska amendment, is before the body. Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Well, so members, we now understand the word character. Okay, so let me just speak to what this amendment does. The A3 Niska amendment is the bill which failed the State Government Committee. And it has unintended consequences. While it says fraud is not free and it would encourage individuals to report fraud, to limit fraud, it does just exactly the opposite thing. What it would do is cause people to not want to report fraud and to hide mistakes, because if you make a human mistake, as we've witnessed, people make human mistakes. It would cause the agency, whichever agency, to lose 10% of their operational budget. When an agency loses 10% of its operational budget, it no longer has the ability to actually investigate and uphold the very mission that the agency is intended to do. So there are tremendous problems with this bill. While I think the representative had every intention of trying to do something good, it does not do good. It would penalize state employees who had nothing to do with the fraud. And it makes it appear as though those agency employees were somehow complicit with the criminal, and they are not. They're just trying to do their job. So even if a small number of reports were in an agency, a very small number, $10 item, a $50 item of fraud or misuse, the agency could lose 10% of its budget. The bill also seems to cut the agency's budget and hamper the ability to put in preventable controls. Eligible beneficiaries will ultimately be the ones who are harmed by this bill. When we do not have the staff, because of these significant 10% cuts, to administer the program that ordinary Minnesotans rely on, that's a problem. Cutting 10% out of the Department of Education could be as much as $2.6 billion. Cutting out of Health and Human Services could be as much as $1.9 billion. Even though the bill says administrative, the line items that go to the agencies are one number. So depending on how it's interpreted, it could be substantial. Who pays that cost? Our students, our teachers, our schools. Who pays that cost? Our individuals with disabilities, our elderly. Members, this is not a good bill. And so I ask you to vote no on the Niska amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment? Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm glad we're having this discussion today because it's important to understand, first of all, we all think that fraud is bad, and we can't say that enough. Fraud is bad, and this state has been victimized by fraudsters. And yes, accountability is important. Accountability is important. But what this amendment does, and I unfortunately wasn't in any committee where it was heard. I don't know where it was heard, and I'm just trying to read it here as we go. But what this amendment is doing is really destroying government. And if you don't like government, if you think government is bad, sure, rip it apart. But if you understand that government is there for the purpose of improving people's lives, that these agencies that this amendment attempts to destroy are there to do good things for the people of Minnesota, to provide health care, to provide human services, to provide education, all of the things that our agencies do, then this is a very bad amendment. This is a destructive amendment. Just because you say that something is about fraud and that it's for fixing fraud does not make it a good thing. Because as you know, maybe members who came here telling their constituents that you were coming here to govern, that you're coming here to make the state work better, make it work better. Don't rip it apart. We don't need Doge in Minnesota. That's what this is amounting to, where people just come in and they say, we hate government, let's rip it apart, without really thinking about what is going on. Let's work together and make government work better so that we can make sure that every dollar that we allocate goes to the expected, intended recipient, and that it does absolutely the most good. That is what we should all be working to do. Not rip apart government, not punish people without any due process, which as far as I can tell, that's what this does. Let's not bring Doge into our state. That was a fraud on the people of this country. We all know that, and the more we find out, the more we know that was a fraud. We don't need to import that into Minnesota. We need to tighten things up like the underlying bill does, give government more tools to prevent fraud, and make sure that things work better and that we get the fraudsters out of our state, but not by destroying government. That is not something we should be willing to do. So please vote no on this bad amendment.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise up against the amendment that we have here today. And want to remind people that if we're cutting 10% from the agency, we're reducing the staff, as we were hearing from Representative Liebling. And what that means in the environment and natural resource world is that's going to make it harder for businesses out there. We already have a federal government that has gotten out of control from our president on tariffs and have made things very difficult with the war. That's raising prices out there. That's been hard on our businesses out there. One of the things that we've heard over time in the environment world and the natural resource world is we don't always have enough people out there to process permits on a timely basis, which slows down things for businesses. This would complicate that problem. Over the last year and a half, couple of years, we've put more money in to make sure we've got more staff out there to process the permits for businesses in a timely fashion. By cutting this, by having this provision out there, it will penalize the agency and reduce that staff. We do want to make sure we're tough on fraud, but we don't want to do it at the expense of our hardworking members who are staffing our agencies that in turn will help our businesses. So please vote no.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What's really hard about this is, Representative Niska, today we actually had 4 bills on the floor, bipartisan bills, that reflect the work that this body is doing to protect the programs and services and the taxpayer funds that are going to them to ensure that Minnesotans get the services they need, that taxpayers are protected, and that we are fighting this private provider fraud. Cleveland had a bill, Bonner had a bill, Witte had a bill, Myers had a bill. But this bill didn't follow the rules. And it's ironic that what you're talking about here is you gave a big speech about accountability and integrity, and then just violated a contract and the rules that your name and leadership's name was on in order to ram this through and not follow the rules and procedures. And the reason that that matters in this fraud conversation is a lot of the things that we on the Fraud Prevention Committee have been talking about is agencies cutting corner and not following the rules. And how we need to ensure that when we find out that there's credible allegations of fraud, that agencies have the ability and the will to stop those payments. That when we find out that there's issues with people backdating, we pass laws to ensure that that's not happening. But what this bill does is say something different. This bill says that you can have a good speech about accountability and integrity, but with the next breath, violate the rules that you agreed to and signed. That's not about integrity. That's not about integrity. That's not about accountability. And that is actually getting in the way, I'll say, of the work of this body, the work of this state government to ensure that we are protecting taxpayers and the programs and services that they have funded. And that's the travesty of what we just saw here today, is it was a fraud on the rules. It was a challenge to the integrity of these rules in this body. And the good bipartisan bills that got passed that are actually doing the work is what I hope the people of Minnesota see. It's also what I hope that when we talk about today, that's the real work. So members, this is an easy vote no. If you care about integrity and you actually care about the work of fighting private provider fraud and fighting fraud, and you care about our votes and our words have integrity, the rules actually do still matter.
I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to take a peek at subdivision 3, lines 2.10 here. Again, this is about a corrective action plan. This does promote integrity. I just had a managers meeting back home before I came in today. And again, I think of the people doing the work, the different department heads that we have at our own business. And in any business, there's corrective action plans. And what I find troubling here in the legislature is when we've had whistleblowers that are in the department that have come forward for years, over a decade, promoting just the evidence that they're seeing and how they've been demoted and how things like a corrective action plan have not happened. Again, it says the agency head must submit a corrective action plan to the chairs and ranking minority members of the legislative committees with jurisdiction over the agency's operating budget. What I like that we're doing is no matter who's at the helm, what this does is it promotes integrity and transparency. Being here, working very hard in human services, both in human services and in health, with colleagues across the aisle, I like that we are including both chairs and then ranking minority members of the legislature. We need to know what the suspected fraud is, including how much money. It's so frustrating to know that these things have been happening for decades, if not longer, and we have folks with vulnerabilities right now that we are trying to figure out, where do we make the cuts? Where do we make the hard decisions that we need to make? Yet we've got agencies that also are not coming forward with a plan at times for us and giving us the information that we need and the steps needed to do so. Knowing that there's only been one staff member fired with billions of dollars going out the door, hard-earned taxpayer dollars. What I see is the stories of like this gentleman I heard this weekend, knowing that some of the SUD services for him are going to be cut and some of his other fellow folks being cut, and that we are trying to bring in provisions to ensure that a corrective action plan could happen and that us as the legislature could know what we need to do so we can shore things up. Again, I really appreciate this amendment coming forward for us. We have to understand where the money is coming from. And also, folks, it's not just government. This is a business in a sense. People are operating and trying to figure out, do they invest in Minnesota? Do they make investments to have FRS services for folks? Do we bring in more folks helping them with their substance use disorder? And so on and so on. And so again, I'm grateful for this to be brought forward so we can have good conversations around this and also understand the agencies need to figure out how to lock arms with the legislature no matter who's in charge. And this will do just that. Please vote green.
I recognize a member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Madam Speaker, Representative Greenman said that to protect the services that people need while protecting the taxpayers. Representative Niska's bill amendment does just that. People are sick and tired of what's happening to the state. It's embarrassing. Over $18 billion of fraud perpetrated on our state, and they want us to do something. His bill solidifies that. And if you don't think that protects the services that we have while protecting the taxpayers, then you're completely wrong. Maybe you haven't read Representative Niska's amendment. It says if fraud is suspected, the agency must report that. A correction action must be in place. Enrollments of the attendees must be suspended. Leadership and employee dismissal hiring prohibited, including those who are negligent or intentionally knew about the fraud. Law enforcement investigations reporting. His amendment also does that. Budget reductions required. Reporting to the commissioners of each of these agencies that we've been fraudulently put on. If you don't think that is protecting the taxpayers, which also protects those who need these services immensely, then you are wrong in this. This is an amendment that people need. So Minnesotans, at first the Democrats wanted to call this amendment not germane. Do you think the people in Minnesota gives two hicks about germaneness when it comes to $18 billion of fraud? Germaneness, Representative Long. This amendment is so germane and so important. Yeah, I can waive two. I'll waive an amendment that's going to protect the taxpayers' dollars and stop fraud and reduce it as best as we can. So germaneness. Minnesotans, they're afraid of this amendment because they know it'll get to the heart of fraud. It can stop the agencies. It can punish those agencies or those individuals that knew about the fraud and suspend some of the enrollments and cut some of their budgets. Isn't that a good thing? If we had $9 billion of fraud Don't you think it's probably a good thing that some of the budgets be cut so the money can go to the people that really need it? The poor, the sick, the elderly? Representative Niska, thanks for bringing the fraud is not free bill, this amendment. I think you'd be foolish not to support this amendment because it does just that. It protects the taxpayers while protecting the services that we say is so important. And lastly, and in closing, Madam Speaker, Representative Liebling, sometimes you say some silly things, like we want to rip apart the government. You know, the taxpayers are so angry, they want to rip apart the government. We're not here to rip apart the government. We're here to fix the government. You said also that we're here to destroy the government. We're here to fix the government. That's why this amendment is so important. We intend to fix the government, and you'll be wise to vote for this amendment. Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. And members, we just heard the quiet part out loud. This bill is to punish the agencies. We just heard it. That's what this amendment is about. If we want to prevent fraud, then we do the things that have been outlined in many of the bills that we are seeing come forward. We strengthen program integrity. We use predictive analytics. We add new internal controls. We expand the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We enhance authority for on-site investigations. We add capacity for fraud prevention in both the Department of Revenue and in the Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Division. And we do what this bill does. We permanently ban fraudsters from receiving money. Those are the things that have been outlined by the Democrats. Those are the things that we are working on to protect the services of individuals. And if we cannot even uphold our own word on the floor, when we have signed, we have posted in the public, who are we to judge other people and their work? I just find it hypocritical. Members, please vote no on the A3.
Representative Niska, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I don't know what conversations you all are having with your constituents, but with my constituents, I'm hearing demands for accountability, demands for answers about the multi-billion-dollar fraud scandals that have gripped our state. I'm hearing frustration and, frankly, justified anger about the fact that any company that had a multi-billion-dollar fraud scandal would have seen dozens, scores of people fired, starting with the chief executive and the chief lawyer. The problem that most Minnesotans are recognizing is that this administration has shown that it is completely unwilling and unable to hold employees responsible. And we hear a lot of worry from the other side that we're depriving agencies of resources or punishing the government. We have given agencies every dollar they've asked for 50 years, and then some. And they still lost billions and billions of dollars. This isn't a resource problem, it's a willpower problem. And I heard a worry that we might be trying to punish somebody in government. Well, what we do here is we punish people who do the wrong thing and we reward people who do the right thing. And the only area where that's not true is government. We just continue to reward bad behavior in government over and over and over again. That's what the Democrat trifecta did in 23 and 24, and that's what this administration has done. So let's take a different approach. Let's punish people in government who are bad actors as well. And that's what this bill does. That's what the people of Minnesota expect us to do. Punish bad behavior. Punish the people who are allowing fraud to happen, responsible for that fraud happening, so that they change their behavior. That's what we're doing to nonprofits in this bill. Let's do it to government actors too in this bill. And I heard the worry that from Representative Liebling that's worried about the rights of employees who backdated grants. Really? We should define just cause as failing to protect taxpayer funds. They're still going to have the same process that's available for employees who currently do bad things. We're just saying overlooking fraud is a reason for discipline. If we're against that, I think Minnesotans have a right to know. And we've heard concerns on the other side of the aisle about this harming beneficiaries. Well, fraud is what harms beneficiaries. Billions and billions of dollars in fraud. That's what harms beneficiaries of the program. This bill protects those programs by removing those criminals and by punishing the people in government who are allowing it to happen so that they will change their behavior. The governor is not accountable. He hasn't held commissioners accountable. It's time for us to hold the administration accountable by passing the Fraud Isn't Free Act. Fraud isn't free for taxpayers. It shouldn't be free for the people who let it happen. It's time to stop the excuses and start the accountability. And the only travesty I've seen today is Democrats fighting tooth and nail to protect the bad actors in state government. Fighting tooth and nail, as we saw last week, to block investigations into what's happening in the fraud in our state. And today, fighting tooth and nail to not even vote on whether or not we can hold bad actors in state government accountable. Minnesotans are watching. They want accountability. This amendment is a vote for that accountability. If you're for holding state government accountable, vote yes.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Amendment is a vote for that accountability.
Go ahead.
Holding state government accountable, vote yes.
Momani Hildsley, no.
Momani Hildsley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 67 nays, the amendment is not adopted. Third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3621.
Third reading.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, now that we're past the vote on that amendment, could you please explain to the body what Rule 13.3 does mean?
Discussion to the final passage of the bill.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Discussion to the final passage of the bill. I recognize Representative Cleavorn. I recognize Representative Nash, and for final passage, I'll go to you, Representative Cleavorn. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm a co-author on this bill, the underlying bill. It is a good bill and deserves your green vote. It's another step in the right direction. I wish that we could have done more, but this is a step in the right direction and urge your green vote.
Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. Today is a day that I have never expected to experience in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I came here today full of hope and anticipation that we would have a great deal of really positive bipartisan work. And I've seen things today I just never expected. To House File 3621, it is a really good bill. It will protect taxpayer dollars. It will protect services. Most importantly, it will protect services for the people who need them. No amount of fraud is acceptable. I think all of us in this room agree to that. Fraud steals from the people of Minnesota and deprives them of the services they need. House File 3621 is just one tool. And I appreciate your support. And members, I ask for your green vote.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, yes.
Momani Hildsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 3629. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 3629, an act relating to state government, changing provisions for grants management.
There are amendments at the desk. We will, without objection, let the author explain the bill before we go to the amendments. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you. Well, I guess we are all very excited to talk about fraud today. So apparently we're going to get to talk about an actual bill that has a chance at passage, where the work has been done in a bipartisan fashion to work together and do something in the name of fraud. We are all sick of fraud. It truly does rob people of the people of Minnesota from the services that they need. It's wrong. There's no excuse for it, and it's not a debate. Every member sitting on this floor believes that. So I'm sure that everyone will be very excited to vote on this bill and vote green. This is a simple but elegant bill. It's a good government bill. It improves the grant-making process and enhances protection for whistleblowers
Representative Bonner, you have the floor.
I just want to make sure that everyone's listening. It improves the grant-making process. It enhances protections for whistleblowers and provides additional tools to cancel grants when there's a conviction of fraud, and allowing for more communication between agencies to protect taxpayer dollars. Specifically, File 3629 is the admin's grant policy bill that makes technical changes to improve the state's grant process. Broadly, the bill proposes the following changes. It adds the definition of a grant recipient to clarify that the grants will be terminated for both individuals and any related parties if convicted of fraud, therefore protecting state funds and misuse of grant money. It refines admin's authority to more narrowly approve agency-requested exceptions to policy requirements on a more granular level. It provides further whistleblower protections in grants-related cases, specifically removing the authority of admin to share the name of the whistleblower with the agency, allowing that whistleblower full protections to act and do the right thing without fear. And further, it provides, it makes technical changes to fix cross-references found to be in error. This bill actually does what it says it's going to do. It is passed through with bipartisan support in both bodies, and I'm hopeful that every member on this floor will be confident to take off their red and blue jerseys and vote for good measures that actually increase the integrity of our grant-making process and to protect state dollars. Thank you.
There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend House Law number 3629. The amendment is coded A1.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Several months ago, the Legislative Audit Commission hears the audits and looks at how things ran and suggestions to make it better. Several months ago, I asked the auditor and a very senior member of the Senate from the other party, I said, let's sit down and have a non-partisan bill. I knew and had heard that there was a lot of back and forth. And so what we did, the chair and vice chair of the Legislative Audit Commission, bicameral, bi-party, as we had the auditor sit down with the revisers and the recommendations on how to do things better, how to improve the processes, came through that discussion between the auditor and the reviser. In a committee hearing, there were agency people that came forward and said, well, there's some duplication here. So what I did is I asked the agency people and the auditor to sit down with the reviser and take care of the issue. They did that. This language is part of that bill that was created from years of actually looking at the processes that were utilized in the agencies and the recommendations to improve them so they could better prevent, detect and prevent issues such as fraud. It also included things that would prevent someone, well, a recent audit had someone that granted over $700,000 in a grant. They were the ones that okayed that and went to an entity, and that days later, that person went to work for that entity. And when we had the hearing for the audit, it was like, aren't there rules against that? Many states, the federal government, have rules against the people that okay the money going to companies cannot then be hired into those companies. So that's part of the idea, is to have appropriate preventative and repercussions for wrong actions, but the main focus is do the right process, do the best things to prevent it, to catch it and do the best job. And that's where this language came from. And it was driven not by the senior senator, not by me. It was driven, the language, by the auditor and the agencies that came forward to work with the auditor to have the best processes put forth. This is part of the bill because it has the same section. It's germane to the underlying bill. And I'm asking you to add this nonpartisan language. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Dakota.
Mr. Speaker, actually, I rise to a point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, I'm considering raising a question of germaneness with respect to this amendment. Could you please advise the body regarding the operation of Supplemental Rule 13.3 and how that works?
Representative Pinto, that's a hypothetical situation that we're not currently on. I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson R.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Quam, I want to just acknowledge the work that you've done on House File 3672, the conversations we've had over the weekend and again today, trying to find a path forward. I did have an amendment that I have withdrawn to remove some pieces of this amendment to try to make it non-fiscal, to try to make sure that we could get a couple things passed, but that's really not possible. And I've shared with you, and I'd share with the body, my discouragement of having cost put on that really makes something impossible. We share your concerns about fraud. I think Representative Bonner's bill is tight, and it also is going to have a great impact. I was trying to think of how do we make something happen in the future here, and we did make those changes to the audit commission process where we can look at the budget, try to prepare a budget in the audit commission for next year and try to build in some of these things. So maybe we have that support. But right now, we can't support the A1, and I would ask for a roll call.
Roll call having been requested, there are 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, at this point, I would say no, ask members to vote no on the amendment. I think there's more work that could be done and would be done. Again, you highlighted the details of the work that has been done, but to make it pass and to make those prices or those costs that aren't there so that we can effectively deal with fraud as Representative Bonner has done, this will be an ongoing journey, and I commit to work with you to make that happen.
Further discussion to the A1 amendment. Seeing none, the clerk will take to the author of the amendment, the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And part of the reason driving this language and activity is that we don't have an independent entity with enforcement. We have an independent entity that audits, but no enforcement, no way to make them do the right thing, do it the right way. And that was part of the drive, is when we see something odd in an audit, we frequently talk about we need, as a legislature, to change the law to make them improve the process. And all this discuss any fiscal note, it just shows how much agencies aren't doing what they should do, because we fund them to do the right things and have the appropriate oversight and activity with the grants and these programs to help people that need assistance. And if actually saying you have to do it the right way is costing money because they're doing it the wrong way, I say we already paid them to do the job, to make sure the people that need the assistance to help get it. They were already funded to do that. And to have the audacity to say, oh, it's going to cost more money to actually do it the right, correct way seems to, I think, be well, I can't call it fraud. I could just say mismanagement of their government responsibilities. We pay them to do the job. They, for years, have been told, you're not doing it right. They've been given lists of things that do it better, and they continue to ignore most of that suggestion. And we've all seen there's almost 90 convictions in recent fraud on one program, but there are multiple programs where it's happening. If that's not an indication that they're not doing the right job, they're not helping the people. Every time I see a presentation and it's not going to the people that need it, I see the faces of people in my district, people that need the help. We get together, we pass the help, but it never shows up. Please vote green so we can have the agencies do the right thing, the right way, and people that need help actually get that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will call the name of the member voting remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, no.
Momani Hiltsley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 67 nays, the amendment does not prevail. There is an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Davis moves to amend House Law number 3629. The amendment is coded A3.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the A3 amendment would require the Commissioner of Administration to report exemptions to the grants management statute. It requires one virtual site visit for grants under $50,000, one in-person monitoring visit for grants between $50,000 and $250,000, two visits, one of which is unannounced, for grants above $250,000. That's $250,000, and I don't think that's too big of an ask because that's quite a bit of money. These provisions are from a bill that I introduced last year, parts which got passed into law. This is some of which did not. Some of these come also from Representative Hicks' bill this year. Thank you, Representative Hicks. It also adds financial reconciliation for grants above $500,000. So in other words, you're getting $500,000 of state funds. We're going to make sure your records line up with the records of the state. This is a good governance amendment that brings accountability in the state of Minnesota, and I would highly encourage you members to vote yes on this common sense amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, under House Rule 4.05, when a budget resolution has not been adopted by the Ways and Means Committee, an amendment is out of order if it increases the total spending of that bill. This A3 amendment would do exactly that. This language is similar to language that was in Representative Chair Quam's bill, which was sent to the Ways and Means Committee explicitly because it has a big budget appropriation included with it. This would include approximately $11.5 million a year by taking on this amendment. I would ask you to take to respectfully ask that you find the point of order well taken.
Mr. Speaker, advice? Thank you. The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would urge you to find the point of order not well taken. You know, 4.05 actually addresses an issue when there is an expression of expenditures in the amendment. So it would say we're going to spend this much money, but it doesn't. There is no fiscal note for this. This is a knockdown version of something that we've seen before. And I would remind the body a little bit of contextual history. Last week in education, there was a conversation around the school safety bill where it was simply expressed, wave of the wand, I guess, that the agency was just they're going to absorb that money. So any costs, I would say, that would be part of this, and it's happened in state government finance. We've heard other people say, well, we're just going to have the agency absorb this. They can absorb or exempt under this. So while Representative Frazier would like you to believe that there's millions and millions of dollars associated with this, there is no expression of spending, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, I would urge you to find the point of order not well taken.
Further advice, the member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very, very, very clever. You're welcome, Chair Nash. The mere fact that we don't mention the appropriation amount, we do understand what adding this type of requirement will do, and it will actually increase, and it will add to the cost of this bill if we do that. So I, again, urge you to take the point.
I've studied the amendment. I have reviewed the temporary rules of the House, and I've considered your advice. I'm ruling that the point of order is not well taken.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask that we divide the...
Representative Cleavorn, are you standing to be recognized for some purpose?
Yes, please.
Is this a point of order? Is this you wanting to give a speech? What is...
I would like to divide the amendment.
Between what lines?
Pardon?
Between what lines?
Between lines 1.5 and 1.6. Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Request a roll call. Yeah. Okay.
Representative Cleavorn moves that we divide the amendment. It appears to be divisible. So to your motion, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. And members, I would ask that we adopt lines 1.1 through 1.5, and I would ask for a roll call, please.
Roll call having been requested, it will be granted. Representative Cleavorn. Discussion on the first portion of the amendment. I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Chair Cleavorn, if you would, once again, we're going 1.1 to 1.5 as a part of the divided amendment, and then 1.6 forward. On the first part of the divided amendment, I would urge members to vote green.
Further discussion on the first portion of the amendment. I recognize a member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also advise a green vote. Thank you, members.
Seeing no further discussion on the first portion of the amendment, the Chief Clerk will take the roll on the first portion of this amendment. The Chief Clerk will call the name of the member voting remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, aye.
Momani Hildsley votes aye.
The chief clerk will close the roll. There being 134 yeas, the first portion of the A3 amendment is adopted. Representative Cleavorn to the second portion of the amendment.
Thank you very much. And I would say that, members, I would encourage a no vote on this portion. This is the piece that actually costs a lot of money. And so in order to keep things humming smoothly, I would ask for a no vote. And a roll call, please.
Roll call is requested. Roll call will be had. Representative Cleavorn, thank you. Any further discussion on the second portion? I recognize the author of the original amendment, the member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, this doesn't create new spending because state employees already get a salary, and this is just helping them actually do their job, being specific about what they are supposed to be doing in their jobs, which is a part of our job here in the legislature. And thank you for requesting a roll call vote. It kept me from having to do it. Members, this is a good governance common sense amendment. We're keeping track of our state dollars. We're making sure that if you're getting grant money, we're going to actually make sure you are who you claim to be. And I guess Democrats don't want that. And we've seen a lot of that in our state recently in the last few years. It's a good governance amendment, folks. Again, it would add one in-person monitoring visit for grants between $50,000 and $250,000. One. Just going to make sure you are who you say you are. And then $250,000. You're receiving $250,000 in grant money from the state of Minnesota. We're going to show up unannounced, one time, real simple. This is not going to cost the state any money. It's just going to actually direct our state employees to do their job. Vote green. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And once again, I would urge a green vote. We have seen a number of times in state government. I just gave you the example in the Education Committee. We've seen other times around the committee work that we've been doing where one of the departments or one of the agencies will come and say, oh, this is going to cost this much. And then a chair will say, well, we're just going to waive that, or you'll have to absorb that. And Chair Cleavorn, I think that's been done in our committee couple times, that we're just going to have someone absorb this. You can exempt or just have them absorb it. So if we're looking at this in the reality of what we're trying to get done, and Representative Davis is trying to get done here, we're trying to make sure that site visits are happening from people that already work for state government. What we're trying to do is knock down fraud, and I think I heard from Representative Bonner earlier that we all agree, she said, that fraud is bad. So let's do this. Let's take the divided part of the amendment, the second part of the divided amendment, and put it up for a green vote because, and I'm just presuming that Representative Bonner is speaking on your behalf, that you also agree that fraud is bad and that we should eliminate that. So let's go and do the rest of this, put it into law, and we'll be on the right trail. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, if you've read audits or seen the hearings, there are site visits. There are supposed to be site visits. This language was drafted so that you could do virtual for small ones, and the criteria depend on how large it is. So if they're already doing or supposed to do site visits, the problem was during COVID, that went away and they never came back to the habit of doing the site visits they're supposed to do. So the cost to have them do what they used to do, but in a better way, I don't understand. So this actually allows defined flexibility to do what they did for many years and should be doing now. Vote green.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Rehrauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, here's an interesting thing about grants and people that actually put them into law is that there's an administrative cost already built in. So I don't know what we're talking about. I don't know where this $11 million came from. I think it's made up. We don't have a fiscal note in front of us. But every single grant already has baked into the cake an administrative cost. And if this becomes problematic, increase the administrative cost, which I hate to do. But this is good governance. I don't even know what we're arguing about. We don't have a fiscal note. If we did, I might have something more to say, but already every single grant has an administrative cost baked in. Please, members, this is good governance. We've seen in the Fraud Committee that literally there is fraud pervasive across the entire industry, across the entirety of our state agencies. This is just one way to maybe curtail it just a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you. And I'm curious and puzzled because it was said that these rules for inspections were waived during COVID. But members, if you remember, nursing homes and assisted livings, they weren't waived. We had $4 million in fines to nursing homes and assisted livings during a pandemic when they were expected to provide the same services as if we weren't in a pandemic. They actually delivered services to vulnerable adults. The interesting thing is they didn't steal any money from anybody. They actually delivered the services. Now we have $9 billion we found out is missing. Not just missing, stolen. The governor's budget proposes more cuts to nursing homes as baby boomers turn 80, more cuts to disability services, and we are actually saying, it might be a good idea if a grant receives $50,000, you get a site visit. That's a pittance. And a pittance of a responsibility to expect that. They travel 4 or 5 hours to get to Roseau, to get to Grand Marais. They don't miss a survey. So how is it that these surveys can't take place? Nobody can answer that. Because the nursing homes now this year are going to face more cuts, and we're going to have vulnerable adults who truly need services. And I'm sure you've gotten emails because I get them every day. This is completely unexcusable that there's even a conversation that we would not be looking to do a site visit or an unannounced visit. They're always unannounced in a nursing home assisted living. Nobody calls you to say, I'll be there at 2 o'clock on Thursday. They might come on the night shift. They might come on a weekend. So to think that you would get surveyed if you're going to get money from the state of Minnesota, that's the least we can do for Minnesota taxpayers. Members, this is a good bill. This is good governance. Vote yes.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Davis, for this amendment. Thank you, Chair Cleavorn, for dividing this amendment and asking for a roll call. Thank you, Chair Frazier, for your point of order. I hope the people of Minnesota are watching, because this debate that's happening right now in this vote is going to be incredibly revealing. Incredibly revealing. I hope all the people of Minnesota read the A3 amendment to see exactly what it is that Democrats think, A, costs money more than what's happening right now, and B, shouldn't happen. Because we've heard from the chair, the co-chair of the Ways and Means Committee and the co-chair of the State Government Committee that what's in this Davis amendment would cost too much more money than what's happening right now. So I hope the people of Minnesota go and look at the A3 amendment, because what they're saying is that this isn't happening right now. and they don't want it to happen because it would cost too much money. Lines 1.10, conduct one virtual monitoring visit for grants of less than $50,000, annual in-person monitoring grants from $50 to $250, and biannual in-person monitoring visits for any grant over $250,000. That's not happening right now, and we're okay with that? And we don't expect the state agencies with the money that we're giving them to do that? Romanet 2, perform a financial reconciliation of grant expenditures before final payment with quarterly reconciliation required for any grant of $500,000. Is that not happening right now? And we're okay with that? That would cost too much money to expect the state government to do that? And withhold funds from any grantee that does not submit a required progress report. How does that cost money beyond the money we're already giving them? Democrats think it costs money beyond the money we're already giving them because they know it's not happening. Minnesotans expect it to happen. And Democrats say no. Vote yes.
There being no further discussion, the Chief Clerk will take the roll on the second portion of the A3 amendment. The Chief Clerk will call the name of the member voting remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, no.
Momani Hiltsley votes no.
The Chief Clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 67 nays, the second portion of the A3 amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The Chief Clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3629, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion. I recognize a member from Hennepin, the author of the amendment, or the bill, Representative Bonner.
Thank you. I appreciate the intent of the last amendment, and I am grateful, however, that it did not go on, and for the simple reason that I think one of the things that we talk about a lot around here, and especially with my friends on the other side of the aisle, but I know this is really important to all of us, is fiscal responsibility. Making sure that the budget decisions we make each and every day that impact the bill that our taxpayers pay is protected, and adding funding ongoing without having that understanding of how that would impact taxpayers is really troubling. I'm grateful that we were able to accept the good portions of that amendment, and that we were able to take a look at that second part. Again, even if we don't agree on whether there is a fiscal constraint or there isn't, when it comes to the people's money, we should be pretty gosh darn sure before we commit their dollars without their knowledge or consent. But I will just say, for this bill in its entirety, despite the debate, the bill's a pretty simple bill. It's not complicated. It's not difficult. Really what this bill is a common sense, good government bill to improve processes around grants management. It provides additional protections by making clear the definitions of recipient so that we can go after folks and share information among agencies when someone is convicted of fraud. That's good prevention. It also adds critical tools in the toolbox to prevent the misuse of state funds and to prevent fraud. Those are all admirable goals and ones in which we all agree. I think that this is an opportunity for us to come together to talk about how we get this bill done and how we make a difference for our constituents. And with that, I want to urge folks to give this vote a green vote and protect our taxpayers. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the name of the member voting remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 133 yeas and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. Members, there are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevailed. Announcements. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom. I recognize Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to bring your attention to an event tomorrow night. It's the Ducks Unlimited 34th Annual Capital Chapter event. It is at Mancini's Char House. Doors open at 5:30 p.m. and you can get more details on that. If you are interested, just let me know if you need more information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to announce that tomorrow, April 21st, Governor Walz will officially recognize Clean Energy Business Day here in Minnesota. Across our state, innovative clean energy businesses are delivering solutions that strengthen our economy, improve energy affordability, and advance a more resilient and sustainable future. Members are invited to join us tomorrow evening for a happy hour at Capitol Ridge from 4:15 to 6 p.m. Come celebrate with us. Thank you.
Any further announcements? I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 4 p.m. Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026.
Representative Niska moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 4 p.m. Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. Representative Niska.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Niska moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 4 p.m. Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026.